The White House fighting tooth and nail for its stalled agenda, but continuing revelations on Russia weighing heavy on the West Wing. I'm Rob Schmidt, and for Julie Banderas, you're watching the Fox Report. And we are keeping a close eye as Vice President Mike Pence prepares to take the stage in Washington tonight, delivering a keynote address at a conservative event later this hour. We'll get back to that. Meanwhile, the president back here in the States after what was widely seen as a successful trip to Paris. President Trump taking in some of the women's U.S. Open today at his golf club in New Jersey. But still dominating the news cycle, his oldest son's meeting with a Russian lawyer during the campaign. We're now learning that meeting was also attended by a Russian-American lobbyist. There in the lower left corner of your screen, you see his picture. The number of participants growing by the day, along with the outrage on Capitol Hill.
This shocking new evidence raises even graver questions about Russia's success infiltrating the election systems in 21 states. This is not acceptable. Congress must act and act immediately. We must get the truth about Russia's meddling and the full extent of the Trump's campaign complicity.
All right, White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live from Piscataway, New Jersey. Kevin, the big question, how's the White House handling the expanding Russia probe tonight?
Yeah, it continues to expand by the day, doesn't it, Rob? But listen, a couple things. First of all, they want to try to stay on message and keep the focus on jobs, the economy, infrastructure, healthcare, of course. But clearly, as this probe expands, they're also doing the right thing, I think, and that is keep adding experienced attorneys to their roster. Let me tell you about the latest to join the Trump team. This man is named Ty Cobb. And yes, I'll get to the fact that he is named Ty Cobb in just a moment. He is a very experienced former federal prosecutor. He's also part of the investigations practice over at Hogan Lovells in Washington, D.C., a graduate of Harvard and of Georgetown Law. And yes, in case you're wondering, he is related to the late baseball great. Now, this addition is an outgrowth of the ongoing probe into the Trump campaign's contacts with Russian nationals during the 2016 election.
Now we know a counterintelligence person in the meeting as well. It's important that we see all electronic communication, whether it's direct messaging, Twitter, email, text, whatever it happens to be, among the members of the Trump family and within the Trump administration.
Echoing that strong approach is California Congressman Adam Schiff. Let me share a statement that he has issued. It reads in part the report that a former Russian counterintelligence officer was also present during the meeting with Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort, if accurate, adds another deeply disturbing fact about this secret meeting, a portrait of consistent dissembling and deceit when it comes to the campaign's meetings with Russian officials and intermediaries. And clearly the idea as you listen to the Democrats is keep pushing the narrative that there must have been something nefarious between the campaign and Russia, meaning the Kremlin, even if it came through Russian intermediaries. It's a story that doesn't appear to be going anywhere anytime soon, Rob.
Every day so far. And you're bringing in, they're bringing in Ty Cobb now, this big-time lawyer. Does that mean they're going to change the approach of the White House on how they handle this whole story?
Yeah, listen, that's a great question. I don't think it represents a change in approach as much as it represents a recognition that as this probe expands, you need to have the best, most experienced people in the trenches leading the charge. And obviously having Ty Cobb on the team means the White House can now focus because they know they have someone who has federal experience, who is obviously very much someone who knows what is all about in Washington. And the truth be told, they don't want to get bogged down in all things Russia, obviously. But as they recognize the seriousness of the probe, they're bringing in Ty Cobb. Now, let me just share what the president is trying to talk about. Yeah, he wants to talk about other things besides Russia. He was on Twitter this morning tweeting the following: stock market hit another all-time high yesterday despite the Russian hoax story. Also, jobs numbers are starting to look very good. And indeed, if we take you back to last week, you can see right there the jobs report for June, much stronger than anticipated, 222,000 new positions created. They had expected about 179,000, so obviously they blew right past that. Unemployment rate still very low at 4.4%. Meanwhile, the president, as you pointed out, is here in the Garden State of New Jersey at the U.S. Women's Open at his golf club at nearby Trump National at Bedminster. A welcome respite, no doubt, from the bruising battles in the past and those looming in Washington. Clearly the crowd enjoying the president's visit there. Now, tomorrow, we expect him to take in a bit more golf before heading back to Washington. And clearly, the ongoing discussion about Russia will be in the headlines, but also he's going to try to keep pushing congressional lawmakers to come up with a repeal and replace of Obamacare. And we think he might talk about deregulation as well. We'll be watching it all very carefully. But for now, Rob, back to you.
Yeah, he needs a big victory, something to deter all of this coverage on the big news channels. All right, Kevin, thanks so much. And other news now, dueling demonstrations across the country. The president's critics making their voices heard, taking to the streets today in another round of coast-to-coast protests. Here's what they had to say in Chicago.
I am a senior, first of all, and I'm very concerned, number one, about Social Security and Medicare. I don't want to lose my benefits. My husband just retired recently, so that's my biggest fear.
The whole regime needs to go. The whole Trump regime, everybody he appoints for any position is the complete opposite of that position.
All right, not to be outdone, some of the president's supporters gathering near his golf club in New Jersey for a rally of their own. Brian Yennis is reporting live from an anti-Trump protest in New York City, which is now heading south toward Union Square in Manhattan. Brian, how's it been out there today?
Hi, Rob. Well, this group got here at about 4 o'clock today. They've been marching from Trump Tower in Midtown all the way to Times Square, now down to Union Square, about 50 so city blocks, and they're on the way. Say 150 to 200 people. This is all organized by RefuseFascism.org. This is an organization that fully believes that the Trump administration is an evil regime comparable to Hitler and to North Korea. They say that in the name of humanity, that it is time that people drive President Trump and his vice president out. They don't want to wait for the election in 2020. They don't even want to wait for the midterms in 2018. Now, when you speak to the folks here, some agree with that. Some are different levels of sort of their anti-Trumpness, if you will. But we did speak to one of the main organizers here from RefuseFascism.org, who told us this, comparing Mr. Trump to Hitler.
Trump, without a question, is more dangerous than Hitler. He has a greater arsenal. He is nuclear armed. He is the head of a sole superpower. These are weapons and machinery of death that Hitler did not have access to.
And on top of that, this organization has been mobilizing throughout the country. Say the protests aren't necessarily huge, but in Atlanta, Chicago, Seattle, a few dozen to a couple of hundred people, in Boston as well. And they had their protests, again, in about 15 cities throughout the country today. Rob?
Pretty sure the Nazis suppressed protests, Brian, but let's get to something else here. There were counter-protests today as well, including that one in Bedminster, right?
Right. Well, we spoke to some pro-Trump people who came out here and they did the counter-protest. Out in Bedminster, you had about 30 to 50 pro-Trump protesters outside of his National Golf Club. The president obviously there for the U.S. Women's Open, and they were out there making their voices heard. There was a protest from a women's advocacy group there that wanted the USGA, or the U.S. Golf Association, to essentially remove that U.S. Women's Open from President Trump's golf course. That obviously did not happen. And here in New York, there was pro-Trump people that countered this rally that has now marched past me, and they essentially said this about the protests.
They are anti-American. I don't know about the anti-capitalist, but I agree with you, not anti-Trump. Trump could be assassinated, Pence could be assassinated or driven out of office. They would still not be satisfied. They're communists, whatever they are not Americans.
Obviously heated on both sides. Good news is no reports of any major violence at all at any of these protests. Obviously, we've seen that kind of violence out in Berkeley, California with the Antifa, the anti-fascists. Good news today, no violence that we know of. Rob?
Oh, that certainly is good news. All right, Brian, thanks so much. All right, it could be a make or break week for the revised health care bill. Its fate hanging in the balance as several lawmakers voice reservations about this plan. Republicans can only afford to lose one more vote at this point, as two senators already are rejecting it. But President Trump does remain optimistic. He says Republicans are on the brink of keeping their promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. Listen.
When I ran for president, I made a commitment to the American people to repeal and replace Obamacare. I am pleased to report that we are very, very close to ending this health care nightmare. We are so close. The legislation working its way through Congress provides the choice and control people want, the affordability they need, and the quality they deserve in health care.
All right, Garrett Tenney is live in Washington with the latest. And Garrett, what is Senate leadership doing to convince Republicans to try and support this bill to get this thing through?
Well, Rob, Senate sources tell us there is a lot of wheeling and dealing going on to get this bill through. And apart from the 2 Republicans who've said that they plan to vote against the bill, there are a number of others who've expressed concerns about it and want to see some changes made. While Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is somewhat limited in the changes he can make, the bill does free up a lot of money he has to work with. And a Senate source tells us McConnell has already used some of that on amendments to try and win over some of those Republicans, like Louisiana's Bill Cassidy and Alaska's Lisa Murkowski. The latest draft of the bill makes a few small changes in definitions that will have a big impact on the Medicaid funding those states receive. States like Alaska and Louisiana that didn't expand their Medicaid rolls until 2015 and 2016 will now see less drastic cuts to that funding and be able to select a higher baseline for their Medicaid funding going forward. Another amendment also creates a short and long-term insurance stability fund. Just one state meets the criteria to receive the funds, and that state, Alaska, will receive more than $1.8 billion a year for the next 8 years as a result. Last night, Mitch McConnell met with a number of senators who are on the fence, and we're told at least 5 moderates in that meeting requested additional changes, namely a more generous formula for determining Medicaid funding in the future. And with the Congressional Budget Office's analysis of the bill expected early next week, there could still be more requests headed his way. And remember, at this point, with 2 Republicans planning to vote no, all it takes is one more for this bill to die. Rob?
Yeah, this once again is not looking very good. What are Republicans going to do if they don't get the health care bill passed? Where do they go?
Well, it would put Republicans in a bad place if they can't follow through with what they've been promising for the last 7 years. Kentucky's Rand Paul is one of the 2 senators who plan to vote against the bill, and he is still pushing for the Senate to divide the repeal and replace into 2 separate bills. And on Friday, he said it's an idea that the president is very interested in as well.
If it doesn't happen, if the Senate leadership can't put it together, my hope is that he steps into the fray and helps push us along. He's indicated that he's open to my idea, which is separate it into a clean repeal. The Democrats and the big government Republicans could work on the spending plans, and the rest of us, including the moderates, could vote on a clean repeal.
Now, as far as right now, though, Mitch McConnell has said his plan is to instead try working with Democrats to simply fix Obamacare. Of course, though, he is hoping that the repeal and replace current bill will be able to go through over the next few weeks. Rob?
We'll have to wait and see. Garrett, thanks so much. Be sure to watch Fox News Sunday for more on the week's biggest stories. And you can catch Jay Sekulow, a member of the president's legal team, answering questions on the Russia investigation. And also, someone you just heard from, Rand Paul, will be in the mix, weighing in on the Senate's health care bill. His vote very critical as he's one of the naysayers right now. Check your local listings. All right, right now, potential hope for the parents of a terminally ill baby at the center of an ongoing legal battle. As an American doctor prepares to evaluate 11-month-old Charlie Gard, what that doctor is saying about the success of the experimental treatment that Charlie's parents are seeking. Also, new details about the victims of a deadly high-rise apartment fire in Honolulu and the flaws in the building that likely allowed the flames to rage on for a number of hours.
The fire just blew up and went flying right out the windows up to the 27th floor. And that was like a horror movie, right? Except it wasn't a horror movie, it was for real.
Well, most residents will be able to return home after a deadly fire at a Honolulu high-rise. The fire killing 3 people, injuring 12 after flames broke out in a unit on the 26th floor on Friday. Officials say 3 floors remain closed because of heavy damage. The building was not equipped with fire sprinklers that would have contained this blaze, and we're learning that the elevators were not working when the fire started. Will Carr is live from our LA bureau. And Will, do we know exactly what started that fire?
Well, Rob, not yet. That's still under investigation, but we do know what kept the fire raging, the lack of sprinklers. The fire sparked around 2:15 on Friday afternoon, and almost immediately, residents and witnesses could see fierce flames shooting out of apartments on the 26th floor of the Marco Polo residential community in Honolulu. Plumes of thick, dark smoke poured out of the building for hours. Listen to one resident describe the scene.
You couldn't breathe, you couldn't see. You couldn't see the steps in front of you. It was that smoky. Even the firemen, once we got back to, so we went back to the elevators. And even the fireman got down on his hands and knees and was huffing and puffing.
According to local reports, the fire killed a 54-year-old man and his 85-year-old mother. The man called his brother on a cell phone saying that he smelled smoke when he got out of the shower, that he couldn't get his mother out safely, so he hid under his bed. That was the last the brother heard from his family inside the building. 3 people were killed and all 12 others were injured, including a firefighter who had to be treated for heat exhaustion.
And we still haven't gotten the elevators to work, so we're actually walking all the equipment up, all the equipment down, up to the 29th floor.
Brutal work considering how heavy that equipment is. The firefighters also had to carry their hoses up and down the stairs so they could connect to the water lines on each floor, Rob.
Well, looking at that building, it's a really big building. It also looks rather new. How in the world did it not have a sprinkler system?
Yeah, it's definitely a high rise. The building, though, was built before 1974. And in Honolulu, buildings that old don't have to have sprinkler systems. Now, I know that seems a bit backwards considering the age of the structure, but the mayor says that you can expect that legislation will be changed in the near future, making sure that every building in the city is prepared to handle a fire like the tragic one we saw yesterday in Honolulu, Rob.
Yeah, it's older than I thought it was. Yeah, it certainly is true. All right, Will, thanks so much. All right, hundreds of thousands of people in Istanbul, Turkey, mark 1 year since a failed coup attempt. Remember this? Citizens gathering on an iconic bridge where Turkey's president inaugurated a monument to honor 250 people killed 1 year ago. Those people opposing militants who were trying to overthrow the government in a botched attempt last year on July 15th. The country's president also warned the coup attempt would not be the last. All right, an American doctor going to bat for little Charlie Gard. Coming up, how he plans to bring his expertise across the pond and help to save Charlie's life. Plus, a show of strength by Iraq's military after U.S.-backed troops helped drive the terror group out of Mosul, driving ISIS out. Ahead, we'll tell you how the Iraqi military is savoring their win. Well, the Iraqi military flexing its muscles with a victory parade. The celebration comes after U.S.-backed troops reclaimed Mosul from ISIS, a destructive and deadly fight that took nearly 9 months. Although Iraq's second largest city is now free of terror, it has been left in pieces, displacing hundreds of thousands of people from their homes. All right, a new show of support for Charlie Gard, a young boy at the center of a legal battle gaining international attention. Leaders and everyday people from across the globe are fighting for his life, and now an American doctor says he will travel to Britain next week to assess the terminally ill boy. Kitty Logan is following this story for us in London.
Hi, Rob. Well, a spokesman for the family has accused Britain's health service of not allowing the parents to decide the fate of their baby son, saying they're effectively holding him hostage. But a judge has said he'll look at new medical evidence related to Charlie's condition. The parents are still hoping to keep their baby son alive after an earlier court decision ruled his life support system should be turned off. Charlie has a rare genetic disease. It's left him unable to move or breathe unaided. His doctors at a specialist children's hospital in London have recommended switching off life support as they see no chance he can recover. But his parents insist he's not suffering and want him to live. An American doctor, Dr. Michio Hirano, says it would be worthwhile to try a new type of treatment. He's treated other children with a similar condition to the disease Charlie suffers from, and he believes there could be a chance to improve Charlie's quality of life. Charlie's parents have been fighting in court to be allowed to take their son to the US for treatment. But his doctors in London say they don't believe this would be effective. They also fear the baby may not survive the journey. They've argued Charlie should be allowed to die in dignity. And now a judge has the opportunity to reconsider. He'll issue a new ruling by the end of July. Rob?
Okay, Kitty, thank you. New developments in the battle over the travel ban. The Trump administration turning to the Supreme Court after a Hawaiian judge loosened the executive order how the high court is responding. Plus, did Texas violate the Federal Voting Rights Act? We're going to take you inside the trial that could bring some big changes to the ballot box. Stay tuned.
We are confident in our arguments in this case and optimistic that the current redistricting plans for Congress and for the Texas House of Representatives will be found fair and legal.
I'm Rob Schmidt in for Julie Banderas. This is the Fox Report. It is the bottom of the hour. If you're just joining us, let's get you caught up with the headlines. President Trump back in the U.S., making an appearance at the Women's U.S. Open, the tournament being held at the President's Golf Club in New Jersey. Meanwhile, GOP leadership working to tee up a vote on the Senate health care bill next week. Fox News confirming that some moderates have asked Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to rework changes to Medicaid in exchange for their support. The negotiation continues. Also talking health care is Senator Bernie Sanders, the former presidential candidate, appearing at Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Convention in Chicago, calling the vote a pivotal decision.
On Tuesday or Wednesday, there will be one of the most important votes in the modern history of this country. And that vote will be whether or not in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we throw 22 million Americans off of the health insurance they currently have.
Sanders has vowed to introduce a Medicare for all single-payer type bill after the current health care debate finishes up. All right, new developments in the battle over President Trump's revised travel ban. The Justice Department asking the Supreme Court for an immediate intervention after a Hawaiian judge expanded family exemptions for travelers from 6 Muslim-majority countries. The Supreme Court has now responded to that, giving the opposing parties until noon on Tuesday to file their response. Ellison Barber has more.
Hi, Rob. The Trump administration is making another appeal to the Supreme Court over the controversial travel ban. Last month, the nation's highest court handed a partial win to the administration, ruling that it was reasonable for the government to enforce the travel restrictions on people who did not have a, quote, credible claim of a bona fide relationship with someone already in the U.S. What didn't the Supreme Court do? Well, according to a Hawaii court, adequately define close family relations. On Thursday, Judge Derek Watson expanded the list of familial relationships people can use to get into the U.S. if they're from one of the 6 Muslim-majority countries listed in the executive order. The government's utilization of the specific family-based visa provisions of the Immigration and Nationality Act constitutes cherry-picking and resulted in a predetermined and unduly restrictive reading of close familial relationship. Other equally relevant federal immigration statutes define a close family in a much broader manner. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says the decision undermines national security and shows a lack of respect for the separation of powers. Some say the Supreme Court's ruling was narrow but unclear, and because of that, the administration narrowly defined close family.
They did not include fiancés, and at the very last minute that same day, that evening, they changed it and allowed fiancés to be included. So there has been a lot of confusion about who is in and who is not, but it seems like there is a strong argument from the state of Hawaii's point of view now to say that, how do you say the grandparent is not a close family member?
The justices are on a 3-month summer recess, but would likely deal with an emergency filing like this sooner rather than later. They'd still deal with the bigger constitutional questions of this ban in the fall. Rob?
Ellison, thanks. The state of Texas telling its side of the story in federal court, denying allegations that state lawmakers discriminated against minorities while drawing up congressional districts. This is a legal battle dating back several years, and one that could have national implications in the 2018 midterm elections. Casey Stiegel is in Dallas with a look at this ongoing high-stakes trial.
It has been a legal battle 6 years in the making. Did Texas violate the Federal Voting Rights Act after the state's Republican-controlled legislature mapped out new congressional and House district lines back in 2011?
Whoever gets to draw the boundaries of electoral districts can draw them in such a way that they advantage their political party.
The courts redrew those maps in 2013, but many minority advocacy groups challenged, saying the new lines were still drawn to favor the GOP and, quote, dilute the Democrat vote. Plaintiffs call it discrimination since more Latinos and African Americans tend to vote Democrat.
We're only at 16% of the U.S. Congress in Texas are Latino. The exact same number since 1970.
In March, a panel of 3 federal judges sided against Texas, saying lawmakers, quote, intentionally discriminated against minority voters. The following month, a similar ruling was issued by the same trio of judges regarding the state's House districts, once again accusing Texas of stacking the deck.
We are confident in our arguments in this case and optimistic that the current redistricting plans for Congress and for the Texas House of Representatives will be found fair and legal.
The stakes are high. If Texas fails to make a compelling argument, the courts could order the state to redraw its maps before the 2018 election. Punishment is also on the table, which could restrict how Texas conducts elections moving forward, requiring district lines be approved by the Department of Justice.
Texas has said it plans to appeal if there is not a ruling in their favor, so this could go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The High Court has already agreed to hear a different redistricting case, that one out of Wisconsin. In Dallas, Casey Stiegel, Fox News.
All right, a new political experiment in Seattle, dubbed Democracy Vouchers, now coming under fire. The first in the nation program is aimed at taking big money out of political campaigns, but some are challenging it in court, claiming it violates their First Amendment rights. Dan Springer has the details from Seattle. Dan.
Well, my name is John Grant.
John Grant is running a completely new type of campaign for Seattle City Council. He's asking virtually every person he meets to become a financial donor.
And we're funding our campaign through the Democracy Voucher Program.
Each registered voter was mailed 4 $25 vouchers, which can only be redeemed by candidates. Grant, a housing activist who's endorsed by the Democratic Socialist Party, has raised over $200,000, nearly all from vouchers given by some of the most unlikely campaign donors, low-income renters, non-citizens, and the homeless, all who can apply for vouchers even if they can't or won't vote.
Someone who's homeless has just as many democracy vouchers as someone who's wealthy and living on a waterfront property in Seattle.
The vouchers are funded by a small property tax, raising $3 million. Just a few weeks from the primary, and only 4% have been returned. Unused voucher money will roll over to the next election cycle. But Mark Elster hopes to prevent that. Not able to support a single candidate, Elster is suing to stop the program because he says his tax dollars are funding political speech he opposes.
It's a clear violation of First Amendment rights. With free speech also comes the right not to speak.
We're also participating in the Democracy Voucher Program.
One goal is to reduce the amount and influence of money in politics. In exchange for getting vouchers, candidates like Teresa Mosqueda agreed to a spending cap. But it may not work. She got limits lifted because opponent Sarah Nelson, who opted out of the vouchers, is raising lots of private money.
That was Dan Springer reporting from Seattle. Voucher supporters say this First in the Nation program gives a political voice to those who have never given to a campaign, and it forces candidates to meet more voters. But critics argue it's another money grab that'll only push Seattle's politics further to the left. All right, Kellyanne Conway appearing today at the Family Leadership Summit in Iowa. President Trump's senior counselor taking the opportunity to slam the media and accuse her detractors of sexism.
So much of the criticism of me is so gender-based. I saw some of it this morning. I would use it as examples, but this is a family audience. But so much of it is gender-based, obviously. And I mean, I remember, by the way, I'm old enough to remember when comedians were funny. I kind of miss those days.
Conway also accused reporters of covering the administration in an incomplete way, focusing on perceived scandals instead of substance. All right, don't miss Water's World tonight, including a spirited exchange with a man who claims he's behind an open letter urging violence in order to oust the president. Here's a preview.
It is in self-defense against right-wing aggression.
Was it in self-defense when you firebombed a limousine during the inauguration?
Yes.
Okay, because the owner of the limousine is a Muslim immigrant. Were you aware of that?
Well, you know, a lot of violence committed by so-called Antifa members is actually committed by these right-wingers who basically seek to make us look bad.
Okay, so the Muslim immigrant who owned the limo that was firebombed was trying to make you look bad how?
I don't think he's the one that firebombed it. It's these right-wing infiltrators. You see it all the time, all over the internet.
So that
There's
wasn't
these
you
so-called
guys.
Antifa groups that have been.
What about
made up
when
by
an Antifa
right-wing
member
infiltrators.
stabbed a police horse in the neck with a knife? Was the horse a racist Trump supporter?
Yes. So the horse.
I didn't know horses could vote.
It's coming up on Watters World, 8 p.m. Right after this show here on Fox News Channel. All right, several American corporations writing fat checks for former President Obama, coming up where some $1 million donations are heading, plus a decades-old tradition in North Carolina now in jeopardy, why a federal appeals court is ruling against this moment of prayer.
Those who are involved in the different agencies, dear Lord, pray your blessings upon them, dear Lord. Guide and direct this meeting today, and our commissioners help them, all of us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.